All right, we're live. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to a special edition of the PropTech Buzz webinar slash podcast, whatever you want to call it today. Live event. It's going to be a special one. It's a AMA CMO Roundtable with me and my esteemed guests on the screen here. Well, I'll intro shortly. But yeah, we asked the PropTech Buzz community for questions on marketing, growth, scaling, brand, all that fun stuff. And my esteemed guests and I are going to do our best today to provide answers to help, hopefully, you founders of PropTech businesses with your challenges as you scale and grow your companies. But first, I wanted to just spend 30 seconds or so on PropTech Buzz itself. I want to thank Ravi for inviting us today on his platform, which I think is fantastic. In case this is your first time coming on PropTech Buzz, I'll give you the official spiel. PropTech Buzz is the world's only new age digital marketing platform for PropTech products globally. But my personal definition of it and how I like to describe it is it's a community. It's a community of PropTech founders, investors, and professionals. And I kind of like to describe it as a really cool PropTech conference, like the last cool PropTech conference you've ever been to. That's what PropTech Buzz is, but it never ends and it lives entirely online. So you can browse vendors and PropTech companies who are promoting their services and solutions. And as a landlord or a buyer, you can browse the solutions without being hounded by a million salespeople, right? So, and then on the side, there's some cool stuff happening on the stage where there's talks and events where they're providing value. And that's exactly what we're doing here today with this podcast and webinar. But yeah, it's a great platform. Enjoyed it a couple weeks ago. Ravi's been amazing. There's some really cool, prominent people from PropTech already in it. So if you're not already a member, I really advise you to join on proptechbuzz.com and yeah, join the party and contribute. Okay, so I want to do my intros to my esteemed guests here. First up is this woman, and when I first saw her post about her story on PropTech Buzz, completely wowed me, and I was just like, "Whoa, this is incredible! What a story!" But similar to me, she did not have a background in real estate, but she impressed the co-founders of Compass a couple years ago, which is a company that most of you are probably across. But she came in at a really pivotal time around 2020, and they gave her the goal of increasing the revenue ahead of a major IPO. And over 3.5 years, she figured out the best ways to drive revenue for the company. She simplified the marketing process and scaled the content creation and standardized a lot of the analytics that they were running to track marketing straight into revenue, which is a key thing as a marketer. And then she built an internal team of marketing advisors or brand advocates that really elevated the brand awareness and did a lot of the hard work for them very efficiently. And so at the end, she helped Compass increase the revenue 72% and led them to an IPO that valued the company at over $8 billion, which is incredible. And today, post-Compass, she is the founder of the Halo Effect, where she partners with PropTech companies to expand their client base, revenue, and profits. She is Kaley Blades and founder of Halo Effect. Welcome, Kaley. Hopefully I did you justice there with that intro. But yeah, anything else you want to add about your story?
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for introduction. Thanks to Ravi for this platform. And yeah, I'm excited for the conversation we'll have today. You can go ahead and introduce Brad too.
All right, amazing. And the other guest for today is a branding maestro, an accomplished strategic marketer. I met him a few years ago. Actually, he found out that I was coming from Australia, and he very kindly took me to an Australian cafe here in New York. He's always been very generous with time and his knowledge. He is the founder of Chief Brand Advisory, which is a brand strategy and transformation company that guides founders, CMOs, and C-suite executives through important inflection points with the speed, agility, and flexibility of a startup. But CBA's pitch is really simple. It's about clarity. Brad always talks about how companies start with that. Companies actually really do know deep down what makes them special. And CBA's job is to help them identify it, clearly communicate it, and give the leadership team the tools to apply it to the day-to-day. In a short amount of time, CBA has attracted Fortune 100 companies and clients, global companies, global firms, startups across AI, fintech, real tech, femtech, hospitality, and PropTech. And CBA actually helped me in my last role at Equiem redefine our brand strategy, which is fantastic, and it did an incredible job. But prior to CBA, Brad was the Chief Brand Officer at Convene, where I'm at today, actually, with an incredible co-working space and event management company. And he was head of the brand strategies behind at SS&K, behind the President Obama Youth Marketing and the yellow wristband of Lance Armstrong, if you remember that. But yeah, he was also noteworthy. Forbes gave him the distinction of one of the top 50 CMOs redefining the role, and Business Insider also said he's one of 20 CMOs to watch. So without further ado, this is Brad Kay, the founder of Chief Brand Advisory and an absolute legend. But yeah, welcome, Brad, to the conversation.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you and Kaley, and I'm really excited for the chat.
Amazing. I'll just do a quick intro for myself, but as the title says there on the screen, I'm the former global CMO of Equiem. Equiem, for those who don't know it, is a tenant experience provider that created the category, but it's essentially software to manage the end-to-end operations of a building to enhance an office building from not just four walls, but to a community with connection and experiences. So I joined them 12 years ago. I was the second employee, and now it's over 800 buildings with 8 figures in ARR in over 25 countries. But as the global CMO of Equiem, what I really helped with was finding product market fit, generating pipeline, expanding to North America and Europe, which is why I moved here 4 years ago in New York, enterprise sales, and brand differentiation. But before all that, I was a founder myself, a former neuroscientist. I'm a total science and tech geek, history buff. I'm an AI optimist, and I'm a Jensen Wang NVIDIA fanboy. So that's me. But enough about us. Should we just get into the questions, guys?
Yeah, let's do it.
Amazing. Yeah. So we posted a post on the PropTech Buzz message boards a couple of weeks ago, and we just asked you guys, okay, what do you guys want to know from us with our different backgrounds on marketing, brand growth, etc. And so we have a couple questions here, and we're just going to roll into it. It's going to be really chill and organic, so forgive us if we kind of go into different places, but this is kind of like I like to call it like a Vanity Fair actors and actors kind of model, where we're just gonna riff and hopefully provide you guys with some value and some insights. But all right, so for the very first question we have is from Aravind Selvaraj, and I apologize if I butcher your name, but okay, his question was, can you share a pivotal moment or decision that significantly shaped your approach to marketing in the PropTech industry specifically? Guys, who wants to take this on first? Brad, Kaley?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take it on. I mean, look, it's probably good for me to give just a teeny bit more background to help everyone understand how I got to where I am today. And then I'll tell you moments that shaped and codified our offering. So I either ran divisions of large advertising agencies like the Digital and Innovation Division, or just general advertising agencies for the majority of my career. My most formative portion of my career was at this company that is I have a deep love and affection for, called SS&K. They were the best known as President Obama's Youth Marketing Agency, and the agency that developed the yellow wristband, among many, many other accomplishments. But what I learned at SS&K primarily was how to work with brands, founders, issues, causes at big inflection points. And whether they were founders or companies that were at the birth, a very embryonic stage in their development and needed to find their voice and birth it into the marketplace, or they were more of a heritage brand that was like a big battleship in the ocean that needed to turn and connect to new audiences or new markets. That was really what I realized, what filled my cup up. It was what I was uniquely gifted at and what I wanted to focus on. So when I ultimately started my own company, Chief Brand Advisory, or CBA for short, I knew I wanted to work with, first and foremost, venture-backed funded founders, usually between Series A and B. It's now really the full life cycle all the way to pre-IPO, but usually between Series A and B, certainly in the early days, because they really hadn't focused. This is a broad generalization, but predominantly true. In that early stage, many founders aren't focused on their brand. They're focused on making the cash register ring. And so what would inevitably happen is we'd get these calls from founders, often from the CRE world, just because my background, I had in recent days, I had been the chief brand officer of Convene. So I was fishing in ponds with a lot of CRE and PropTech founders. And they would come to me and they would say, hey, listen, my lead investor and my lead advisor recently pointed me to you. He said I should talk to you. And I was like, okay, why do you think that is? And he said, well, I gave him my pitch, my most recent pitch, and I said, "Oh, can you let me hear it?" And they'd say something like, "Well, I hate that question. I hate having to describe what I do." And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's a small challenge." And then the second thing they do is they'd say, "Well, we're kind of a B2B, end-to-end, AI-enabled SaaS platform," and that right there kind of became the everything to this insight into simplicity and being uncomplicated, and really helping. More than anything else, our mission is really to uncomplicate brands, uncomplicate narratives, uncomplicate founder stories, uncomplicate the visual vocabulary, and really distill to its simplest state what it is you do, how to tell that story, what is your unique value proposition, and how to get that out in the most compelling way. So that was my insight. Was a lot of founders really got somewhere between that initial startup phase and getting funded. Something happens in the echo chamber where these founder-led brands get gummed up and complicated very quickly. And so I'm hoping that over time we will continue to liberate more and more founders and let them tell their story in a very simple way.
I love that. I mean, I've seen that. I feel like that's a universal marketing problem, isn't it? Across many industries. Like I've seen, I'm not going to name any brands themselves, but I've seen some of my favorite brands become really convoluted over the years. And I revisit the websites and I'm like, what has happened? What's going on? It's just a matter. It's just like the law of inertia. It just gets more and more complex.
Yeah, I mean, you see it happening with AI right now, right? How many companies in the last year have changed their company descriptions to ensure that they're inflecting AI in just the right way? But once again, they get into this, alphabet soup of jargon with acronyms, and within the first 3 sentences, you really can't quite tell what they do or how they do it. Exactly. Kaley, what was your experience?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Obviously very similar to what Brad's saying. And I almost like to think of it, because I have a background in literature. So like you think of writers, right? They have editors that they work with that edit their work. And it's almost like that, where you need someone like Brad to come in because you're so attached to your product. You're working on it day by day. You need someone to come in and kind of, simplify it for you, like you're saying, because you're so attached to the features of the product. But yeah, my story at Compass, it's very similar. So, we had a lot of product campaigns that we were running, and it was really important to highlight the product, the benefits of the product. We had faster listings, smarter lead generation, lots of really great data that was coming out of the products we were making. And so I was tasked with creating, marketing campaigns for these products. And the first couple campaigns that we ran, I noticed, some of the agents were a little worried, and I really had to spend some time with them and sit with them and like shadow them. And basically what was happening was they were really appreciative of these tools, but they were worried that, the personal touch was lost with their clients. So what we really had to do was shift the way we were running the marketing campaigns. So we realized it wasn't just about the tech itself, but what was the value proposition for these agents and marketing it to their clients, right? So what mattered to them was building genuine connections with their clients, providing deeper expertise to their clients, fighting for their clients' best interests in negotiations. And so we centered these campaigns more around these value propositions. And we found that it was the tech actually enabled them to spend more time, delivering what they needed to for their clients. So I think it just goes to show that, technology really amplifies the human elements that will always be at the heart of this business, which is real estate, right?
I love that. And that really resonates with me because one of the things that Brad's company, CBA, helped us with was, it was like year 9 of Equiem's journey. And there were a bunch of competitors. I mean, I felt like we lost our unique selling proposition, our messaging, and Brad helped us kind of refine it. But his process that he took us through was, pretty straightforward. But a lot of companies miss this, which is what you've done, Kaley, which is talk to your actual customers and interview them and ask them, why did you pick us? What makes us special in your eyes? And for Equiem, it was like something that we didn't really anticipate. We thought it was all about the product, the user experience, but that was important. But what was even more important was the people of Equiem and the relationships that we built with our clients. That was more important. And that's the reason they chose us and stayed with us. But, I think that's foundational, and it's so powerful to find that and drive the rest of your marketing, which is great.
Yeah, by the way, that's probably a great point to punctuate in a post-pandemic world where people are in the office less. And, probably more on a 3-2, 3 days in, 2 days out, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with a Monday and Friday hybrid schedule. And you just see, again, to me, it's a very interesting juxtaposition. The more we advance with technology and AI solutions and buildings that are powered by, myriad and sundry apps like Equiem, the more people are still craving that human touch. And still, even with all the apps and with all the technology, they want, especially in as it relates to commercial real estate, with more likely Class A buildings and in companies like the one that you're sitting in right now, Convene, which obviously I'm a huge fan of, and I remain, in very close contact with them, and we do a lot of work with them. They are a hospitality-driven organization at their core, and they understand human connection. And so to your point, David, all the technology in the world, and the technology is important to create frictionless environments, but at the end of the day, there's, especially now in a post-pandemic world, people are craving connection. They want to rub sticks together and collaborate, and they also want to feel taken care of, right? So I just think that's a great insight, Kaley.
100%. My kind of story, I'll tell you guys a real quick story, but I've always viewed marketing as a science and an art and science, because my background was in science. I was studying neuroscience, but I was also very creative. I've been playing guitar for 25 years. I've been in rock bands. I've done every genre of music ever. But I've always had this like 50-50 view of marketing, where the art is in the intuition, and your gut feeling, and the creativity, the things you can't measure, and the science is in the data, the testing, the systems. And my epiphany was that our buyers, our real estate landlords, are exactly the same. They're a mixture of the rational with the irrational, with the emotional and the systemic. And so one event that happened to me was I was invited to this roundtable in New York. It was our very first event in New York when we launched over here. And I had no idea who was in the roundtable because it was kind of organized last minute. They didn't reveal who it was. But when I got in the room, it was the top 10 landlords in New York, all represented: EQ Office, Silverstein, Blackstone, Kushner, RFR, Sage, Nuveen, Boston Properties is not New York, but big landlords. And I was like, fresh out of the water. I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. And I was the only service provider in the room. And so they hammered me with questions about ROI and value proposition and like numbers, like what's the value, David? Why should we care about your software? And then, I was barbing back at them and doing my best to answer. But then one lady from Nuveen, I remember, backed me up and said, actually we do a lot of things in tenant experience and it's working. And then the guy from EQ Office also backed it up. And as soon as those two spoke, the entire room changed and no one cared. They completely forgot about ROI and the numbers. And they started asking things like, so what are you guys doing? Like, how's it working? And so my insight was kind of back to my assumptions, which is landlords are rational, always rational, thinking about the numbers, but they're also emotional. They will follow the leader and they will use technology to stand out from the pack. And so that drove our marketing strategy, because then I focused our marketing on three pillars, which was education, trust, and value. And then everything that we did was around that. But yeah, that was just, I still remember that to this day. I was like, what is going on here? But it was a real epiphany.
Yeah, no, listen, I think that that resonates deeply with me too, in that, especially if you're asking people to download an app when they get into the building, which isn't, it's kind of like a walled garden ecosystem. There needs to be credibility. There needs to be trust. There needs to be an understanding that there's a fair value exchange. And you're asking someone to download an app onto their phone when they've got probably hundreds of apps on their phone, legacy apps that they haven't used in 3 years, as well as the ones on their front screen that they're using every day. And, it's not native to them. So how do you make it native to them? Well, they need to trust that they're going to get something that they can't get anywhere else. And that requires brand building, right? Like you don't just say, hey, now that you're in this building, download the app and you can reserve a conference room. Okay, why should I do that as opposed to just signing the board or digitally signing the board? So I to me, and obviously I have a very singular lens, which is a brand building lens, but we did this time and time again for brands like Convene and others. There's an alchemy of experiences to set that mousetrap up right, to establish credibility, to reinforce hospitality, to make sure that the customer experience, which ultimately nets out in NPS scores, is really valuable. And so that, to me, that's all aggregate brand. Do you know why you exist? Have you communicated your vision properly? What is your value prop? Do you know who your stakeholders are? Have you established a voice that is unique? Is it human or is it corporate? How are you disseminating that voice? Is your visual vocabulary human, which is especially important? I mean, look, this conversation is about prop tech, but it's really tech. And tech, for whatever reason, the dogma in tech is it's cold, it's antiseptic, it's clinical, whatever words you want to use. A lot of tech leaders, as smart as they are, and I've met so many that are just brilliant, they don't think they need to speak human speak. And they don't think that, they're like, oh, that's B to C. We're really B to B or B to B to C. You're B to an end user. And that end user takes their jacket off at the end of the day and gets in the same bed as everybody else and puts on their jeans the same way as everybody else. So really understanding that it's a mind shift, and it's really important in tech and in prop tech, I think. Kaley, you're gonna say something.
Yeah, so I want to go back to what David was talking about, just on the point that you mentioned with the emotional decision making. So right, if we think about that, like the emotional part is actually, I think they make emotional decisions based on what is the social proof, right? Like what is everyone else, how is everyone else deciding? What are your current customers happy with? So I think consumers nowadays they're not as trustworthy as they were in the past, because there's just so many options that it's really important. They require that social proof before they even consider thinking about a new technology or product, right? So that goes into a topic I want to get into, which is building brand advocacy around your product as well, right? So something we really focused on at Compass was, turning our users into brand advocates. And something that's really beneficial in doing that is you have, you decrease your customer acquisition costs, right? You improve the lifetime value of your customers. And your users become your brand advocates, which lend their voice and credibility to your brand. They're influencing their network and community. And in real estate, I think network and community is really an important thing to have, because that's how they're all making decisions. Maybe there's some sort of hive mind in that where they're all kind of making decisions together, which I think is like an important thing to think about.
Can you talk us through how you did that? I'd love to learn more about how you actually executed that, or like the origin of the idea, and then how you brought it to life.
Yeah, I think so. Brand advocacy it's something that needs to be earned. It's trust, right? You're earning trust. So I think there's different ways of earning brand advocacy. I think depending on the product. For Compass, it was understanding what our users needed. So they needed tools and they needed assets in order to express their brand to their audience, right? So if we provided them with those tools in order to show their audience who they were, because how Compass acts is you have a lot of almost like small businesses, right? Like the agents are small businesses. So those are our end users. And so by providing them the actual tools and technology, they were able to really promote the much larger Compass brand as well. So that was how we did it. I think, when it comes to other like technology products, it could be understanding how you're going to promote status and success in your network, right? So how do you reward your users? Maybe there's loyalty, maybe there's referrals that you have, like there's some type of incentive to help build that, advocacy with your brand. But yeah, it's all about fostering a sense of community and a sense of belonging with your product.
Got it. Is there a point where you have to make it worth their time to advocate as well?
Yeah, I think totally. What's the incentive in it for them?
Yeah.
And I think as humans, naturally, we want certain things. We have certain drivers. So like I was saying, how does your product, promote them in their job? How does it promote their status or make them more successful to their peers or their boss, right? And if you can find those levers, that's going to be like how you can incentivize them.
Brilliant. How about you, Brad? Have you dabbled in brand advocacy work?
No, not so much. But you know what? I will tell you our approach to, because it's kind of like a 3-lever approach to building a brand that is accretive to shareholder value and overall valuation. And that is, our thesis is you need to codify your brand, right? Your corporate brand, which is your mission, your vision, your values, your voice, your visual vocabulary, your go-to-market strategy, all of that, corporate brand. Second, you need to dial the founder brand. This is a missing link that most companies don't pay attention to. So the founder or the CEO or the C-suite, what do they represent and how can we make it symbiotic with the corporate brand? In other words, what are their thought leadership platforms? How are they telegraphing publicly in conferences, on panels, through thought leadership, on LinkedIn and blogging? What are they saying that is accretive to the overall corporate brand? So we've got corporate brand, we've got founder brand, and the last thing is the community brand. So if you dial the corporate brand, you dial the founder brand, then the last question is, do you know how to disseminate all of that information to the community? The community is your stakeholders. Your key stakeholders are your employees, your customers, your investors, shareholders. Name the folks that you need to communicate to. Those 3 things equal what we refer to as the platform. And once you've got your platform dialed, all boats rise at the same time. So it's a 3-pronged approach. Many of our clients buy them in aggregate, like they understand the value of the package to get to the platform. Some of them disaggregate them and they say, you know what, we actually just want to work on our founder or executive brand profile. We feel like our corporate brand is pretty dialed in at this moment, but our founder brand or the executive brand just doesn't feel connected or aligned, and we really need to do that homework and get that chassis built. So that's look, I've done all of that in various components for different clients. I think when I joined Convene, it was the alchemy of so many different pieces that needed to come together, and they came together so beautiful, like one big symphony. But it was kind of the perfect job for me because it included, my remit when I first joined Convene was, can you make us feel like the lobby of the Ace Hotel on an amazing Thursday morning when it's just like there's music, but it's not overpowering. There's a vibe. People are connected and collaborating, but everyone's kind of everyone feels connected in a great way. And that was the perfect brief for me. I would consider myself a little bit more of an aesthetic marketer. And by that, I mean someone who really understands intuitively sight, smell, touch, feel, vibe, the marketing chassis, the brand, how you're greeted, right? Like, so when we ultimately, defined Convene as a real estate hospitality brand versus a meetings and events and conferences platform, and we laddered it up to that real estate hospitality platform that was all about human connection. It became very easy once we had that kind of North Star or noble purpose, whatever you want to refer to it as. It became very easy to understand what we needed to do to make sure that we shaped the brand appropriately. We needed to do everything. First was just cement the brand in a playbook. And that playbook is important. The brand, this is one of our key SKUs, if you will, at Chief Brand Advisory, is you have to have an underlying brand chassis or a playbook if you're going to scale properly. And what that really means is you want to make sure that as you're scaling, everyone is speaking off the same song sheet. And without that, you have a lot of people who will freelance decisions. Oh, you know what? I'm feeling kind of like cute today, so I think I'll tweet something, a little bit cute. Well, cute isn't in the brand profile. It's not one of our attributes. So, or sassy, or snarky, or whatever it may be. Like, you need to understand everyone needs to understand what the brand represents. And once everyone understands it, all of the communications become incredibly aligned. So, what does a brand playbook include? Mission, vision, values, voice, elevator pitch, boilerplate language. None of this changes. None of this gets to be modified in any real substantive way. And what that enables you to do is, no matter how many convenes we opened, visually, they were localized to the particular market, whether it's San Francisco or Chicago. They had a localized feel, but they were all totally consistent visually. Everyone had a script. And so when David came in, you were greeted a very specific way. You might have even been given a gift if you were a new guest or a new entrant to where you are at 530 Fifth Avenue. So we had a very specific playbook that we were executing that felt much more hotel hospitality brand. And then we took it overseas. So I think all of these things, the way it smelled in there, the flowers that were displayed, the lighting and how dim or light they are, all of it plays a central role. And I consider all of that brand, right? Like, it's not just the pixels on the website. It's not just the visuals that we display in the banners. It's the aggregate sum of, all of the parts that we're referring to. And I see in the background in the environment that you're broadcasting from, David.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Like, in terms of a cliche, like it's a brand is how you make other people feel, how you feel about it, and that's
right.
exactly how. But yeah, I want to talk about I think Convene is a more advanced company, but for the early stage companies, I've been talking to a lot of founders in PropTech, and they're like, where do I even start with my brand? Like, what is a brand? And I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I just tell them, like, start with the founder brand. Talk, and in terms of brand, just tell your story. Tell your story of why you started this company. There's a reason why you started it. It was innovative. It was disruptive. Don't lose that and share that. And then so that's pillar one. Pillar two is customer stories. Share your wins with your customers. Tell their stories, how they're solving things. And then lastly, share your journey as you build this company, not just the achievements of product and new clients, but all the challenges, all the warts, and how you solve them for yourself and others, and keep it real, essentially. But that's where I like to start. Really simple. But how about you, Kaley? What's kind of your playbook for brand? How did you deal with brand at Convene, but also now at Halo?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like, right, Brad, what you're saying, it seems so easy, but it's like most businesses would say, yeah, I have a brand book, I have a brand, but it's making people stand behind that brand. And I don't think that's an easy thing to do, right? Like you have to motivate employees and people that want to be a part of that brand. And I think that's the key. That is the challenging part, right? So yeah, exactly, David. Like you're saying, I think, you start with your audience, right? Like who are you serving? Um, there's a lot of different ways of really learning about your audience as you're a new company. I always talk about like, so you have product market fit, right? What about brand market fit? How does your brand market to your audience? And it's really just taking that as a stage and really learning about the feedback of your brand. But yeah, it all just starts with your mission and why you're doing it. And I think like the rest will follow. With Compass, there was a really, really strong mission. It started with the founder, and he really had a strong purpose for why he was doing what he was doing. And it's actually a really touching story. His mother was a real estate agent, and he just saw the difficulties that she faced as a single mother and as a real estate agent.
Oh, wow.
And that really motivated him in what he did. And I truly do believe that like when someone has a strong mission, and a motivation behind what they're doing, it's really evident in like all of their decision making. So the decision making of the founder and the leader, and how that impacts all the decisions he's making within the company. And then hopefully it kind of trickles down to the motivation of the employees and people who are working for him. But yeah, I think it's definitely a challenging thing, that, it's a lot of testing, a lot of feedback. And I think, if you really have a strong purpose for what you are doing, then, the brand will follow that. So.
Yeah. By the way, Kaley, oh, sorry. Go ahead, David.
Just a short anecdote. Yeah, I feel like there is a real difference between a founder that really believes in the why of they started this company versus a founder that's kind of just found something that works. And when I speak, there's a real distinction from my experiences of those two groups, because the passion is so evident and it just flows through. Whereas the other side is just like, okay, you're kind of just doing this transactionally, let's say that, but it's not quite 100% there. It's 90%, but like it's not quite 100% in terms of like the passion coming through it. But yeah, I find that fascinating. But Brad.
Yeah, I'm looking at some questions that are coming in, and I think there's a very good one from Asha. It says, how does branding differ from 0 to 1 and 1 to 100 companies? I'm running a startup, should take branding very seriously from day 0. Question, is there a paid course? I mean, I think this is an unpaid course, right?
Brad might be launching a paid course soon. So watch this.
Maybe with David and Kaley's help. But I think it's funny because David and I were chatting about this yesterday. I mean, when I think about my company, we've been around for 4 years. I would say 1.0 of Chief Brand Advisory. I had a very specific insight, and I mentioned this to David yesterday. And the insight was driven from my arrival at Convene. So when I arrived at Convene, I think the company had already raised $150 million. And within 3 months of joining the company, we raised another $150 million. So we had raised $300 million in a series. I want to say it was a series C or D. I forget. I think it was a series D. Anyway, what I realized very quickly was the skill set that you need from when you're scaling from 0 to 10 million is very different than the skill set you need throughout your company when you're scaling from 100 million to 1 billion. And nowhere is that more true than in the marketing department, because the marketing department has all these different species, right? They've got like writers, and they've got creative directors, and they've got performance and growth marketers, and they've got brand specialists, and they've got PR and strategic communications and community managers, and all these different species that are kind of like they're cousins, sometimes first cousins, sometimes distant cousins. And so 0 to 1, look, I have a very specific perspective. And as I said, I look at the world through a very specific lens. I think any founder, Asha, in your case, you're an early stage founder, there should be some basic homework to put together and codify your brand and put together, you know, what I'm referring to as this brand chassis or the scaffolding, right? And that is, you know, both you've heard now David, Kaley, and myself talk about this. You need to have your basic mission, your vision, some values, and or your elevator pitch. So let's start there. Like, to me, the elevator pitch is essential only because, and you should talk about it as often as possible. You should tell everyone you know, like, just hopefully you're getting lots of questions and people ask you what you do and you get to rehearse. But that is it's a very weird thing that happens, but a lot of founders can't articulate what it is they do. And it is very hard to raise money if you cannot articulate what you do. It is very hard to bring legion of people, employees and apostles on your mission if you cannot communicate what you do. So, you know, I would say if the elevators were closing right now and I had to describe the elevators closing, I would say we're the uncomplicated company. We uncomplicate brands. That's it. That has taken a long time to distill, right? I was like, well, we work with this and that. We simplify and uncomplicate narratives, brands, visual vocabularies for venture-backed founders and heritage companies. You have to be able to do that. You have to be able to succinctly say that. Then you need to move into the phase of articulating your brand through your site and through thought leadership and things of this nature. But I think when you're an early stage founder, oftentimes you have to focus on making the cash register ring, because you're not going to raise any money if you're not generating sales. So I understand why there's a prioritization, but I don't think that they have to be, it doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be, well, I'm only focused on sales, therefore I can't focus on brand. Do the basics. You don't have to overcomplicate it. Get your house in order. Make sure you're sending the right signal to the right people. And then as you progress, you could talk about some of the things or investigate some of the things that we're talking about. David and Kaley, do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say, if I had to summarize all of that in one word, it would be clarity. What is your clarity of purpose, right? You know, your brand's identity at this stage is constantly changing as an early stage startup. But that doesn't mean that, you know, you can't have a clarity of purpose. So if your product's changing, if kind of what you're doing is changing, you still have that clarity of purpose in the market that you're serving. So, you know, just keep that consistent and, you know, make it around the solution you offer, right? Make it super appealing to your target market. And that's really like the best you can do at that stage. But yeah, I think sometimes people worry about having this like super sophisticated brand early on. And I think it's important to know that like no large sophisticated companies actually have a super sophisticated brand in the early stages. It's very disjointed. I know like when I came to Compass, there was a lot of different disjointed elements and, you know, people were using different fonts and all of that, which like as a marketer, that's like really frustrating. But yeah, it happens, I think, when you're in those early stages, and then that could be cleaned up later on, right? So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think my take on it is aligned with both what you guys have said. I think my answer is definitely yes to your question. I think I actually personally consider it, if not step one, but step two, when I'm building a strategy, a marketing strategy of any kind, after the business model, it's the brand strategy. Because to me, if you think about it, you need to, in order for your customers to buy your product, they need to firstly know who you are and know you exist and what you're about, and then trust you. But the core to that first couple of steps is your brand, because your brand is how you're sharing your story. Like Brad and Kaley had said, it's how you're articulating your point of view and your value with clarity. And common to whether you're a 1 to 5 million ARR company to 10 to 50 million ARR, your brand narrative, whatever you call it, I call it a manifesto, is going to be common to those stages. You're not going to change that manifesto unless your business model changes. And so I think the difference will be when you're a startup, and this is what I would recommend for early stage founders, is keep it simple. You know, start with one channel. It might be LinkedIn if you're in PropTech, because most of our audiences are in LinkedIn. But just talk about like the 3 pillars that I said: your story, your why, your customers' wins, and your journey as a founder. And then as you get more scale and you get bigger, then you can start adding events, PR, podcasts like this one, advertising. But really the difference is just the complexity, but the core strategy is going to be common. And so you have to build that strategy.
Totally agree with you, David. I mean, I think I'll add one other thing, and then I see another question, which David, you may want to field about global to local. But I will say this on the founder/executive brand. I'll give you my best example, which is probably the most telegraphic and well known to many. And by the way, I talk about this a lot on my LinkedIn. If you want to follow Brad K at LinkedIn, I write about this a lot. But I look at Mark Zuckerberg, and I look at his transformation as an avatar for many people who can relate to a famous person or not relate, but can see the transformation in real time. It was only, call it less than 5 years ago. All we saw was a pasty white guy sitting in front of Congress, sweating profusely while he was being questioned. That's the only visual we ever saw of Mark. Was, yes, his company was incredibly successful, but it went from interrogations in front of Congress to failure about the metaverse and what a goof it all was and what a goof his strategy was. Well, only a few short years later, Mark is not a goof. His company today is trading at $520 per share as of this phone call. He has done a complete transformation in the last 2 years. Take a look at him. It is not by mistake. This is complete choreography. He looks great. I mean, he physically looks great. First of all, he was a collegiate athlete. I think he was a collegiate fencer at Harvard. So I think he's always been in shape, but we always saw him in a very specific and non-flattering way in the media. But what you'll notice if you take a look at him the way I study people, his Instagram is much more familial. He is constantly talking about different interests that he has, whether it's kite surfing or foiling or MMA or whatever it may be. He also talks about his family. We see pictures of him with his wife and his child now. We see pictures of his interests like farming and raising, new cattle stock and creating a better product of steak, whatever it may be. It's all choreographed. It is not happening by accident. It is to humanize Mark Zuckerberg. And by the way, if you chart it as I have, there's a direct correlation, be it anecdotal, between his evolution and the stock's evolution. Then go to the narrative. His narrative became hyper-focused. So he stopped talking about the metaverse. He started talking about the year of efficiency. The year of efficiency became, we're going to innovate, but we're going to do it really judiciously. So now he's sending a signal to Wall Street that he's going to be really, really budget conscious. He started damping down this whole language about the metaverse and showing bizarro avatars of people without hands and feet. And so you have a narrative that got dialed, you have a visual vocabulary that got dialed, and you have a corporate brand that started honing its mission, which was much more about the core product. And then all of a sudden it started integrating AI, not the metaverse. That is the alchemy I'm talking about, where you get a founder brand that is both visually and substantively dialed and looks and speaks exactly right to the signal that they need to communicate to that audience at the right time. And it works symbiotically with each other. When you get that alchemy right, you see a big accretive jump to valuation and shareholder value, and everything all boats start rising at the same time. Now, let's go to my startup, Yatra. David, you take that one.
Yeah, sure. So my startup Yatra asked, as a SaaS startup, how do you see global branding, messaging versus branding? Yeah, my 2 cents on this as a startup specifically is to not overcomplicate it, like we've been saying. You do not want to have disparate messages across your different regions and markets. In my opinion, as a startup, you want a clear and consistent value proposition and definition of what you're doing. The extent of tailoring it to regions, in my opinion, at that early stage is really just any key language differences, like obviously the language, or in the US and UK and Australia, for example, there's things like the Zs and the Ss that kind of stick out. But ultimately, in my opinion, especially if you're just starting out, I wouldn't fragment your messaging per region. I would have a consistent message across all, and focus on that for now. And then you can further complicate things as things go. For Equiem, for us, we were in over 25 countries by the time I left, and our core pillars of our brand strategies stayed the same across all 25 countries. The languages stayed were different, there's some nuances, but by and large, our value propositions were the same, our core USB and our slogans were the same, and it gave us a really consistent kind of identity across the PropTech ecosystem. But yeah, Brad,
I will say this though. I'll give you another example of a company that I feel does it really well. If anyone is familiar with Soho House and the Soho houses, they're all over the world, and there is this beautiful consistency. You know exactly what you're going to get in that product, at least in the physical world. Like, it all feels the same, but it's hyper localized. So, if you go to I'll even take it into New York City. If you go to the Soho House on 14th and 9th in the Meatpacking District, it feels one way. If you go to Ludlow House, which is on the Lower East Side, the cuisine's different. You get a Lower East Side, you might get a bagel and lox, which is reminiscent. For anyone who's not from here, there's a famous delicatessen on the Lower East Side called Katz's Deli. So they're picking up local flavor. They're picking up local articulation of culture, and the way that they program their houses, whether it's through speaker series or through talent like music, is usually infused with the people that are from that area. And then you take that at a global level, whether you're in London or myriad other places, you're gonna get that same vibe. It'll feel like a Soho House at the most global level, but it'll be hyper localized in terms of the
totally
culture.
Right. Yeah. Not to think about it. That is a great example. The co-working spaces, the best ones out there, take a little bit of the local city and infuse it accordingly. I love that. That's a great example. Kaley, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, that makes me think of like a hotel brand, right? Where you have the more local feeling but you can there's still something to say about still recognizing that larger brand. So I think it's important to like keep your larger brand consistent no matter where the location is. But yeah, I think when it comes to specific locations, it's just being an expert in that market, really understanding how it works, and kind of using the language that those people might use might be a little different from place to place, but your overall brand mission and your overall brand feel is still going to be the same and consistent, which I don't think that's an easy thing to do. But when you see the best the best brands, that's how they do it, and they do it well.
Yeah, I see this. There's another question that just came in that David, with your permission, I'd love to take the first crack at.
I think this might be a perfect final question to tackle.
Yeah, this one is from Prop1. It says, as a UAE-based PropTech company, we're grappling with the decision between hiring a fractional CMO, working with a marketing agency, building an in-house team, or opting for training programs. So I think I mentioned when I first started my company, 1.0 of Chief Brand Advisory was what I would refer to as marketing augmentation. I have an allergic reaction to the word fractional. I think fractional may work for CFOs and accountants, but when it comes to marketing and brand, I have, like I said, I have an allergic reaction to the word. So let's call it marketing augmentation. And my insight was, what if I could create a group of senior, seasoned brand and marketing executives that could augment companies like yours, in this instance, the UAE-based PropTech company, and kind of give them a little extra muscle in areas they may not have. So when you're in that early stage of a startup, you may not have someone like me with my skill set, because you probably have, I refer to it as the holy trinity of a marketing department. You've got a growth or performance marketer, you've got a social media manager, and you've got a content developer. And these three people tend to drive, optimize the performance of your marketing funnel and make the cash register ring, and that's awesome. But then one day you need to graduate and add some new skills. So 1.0 for us was adding that muscle, and then we kind of just became a full service provider of brand strategy and go-to-market materials. I would say for you, I think you really need to assess your needs. Do you need a fractional CMO or a CMO that augments your team, or like what are the needs at this particular life stage of your company? Is it brand? Is it go-to-market materials? Is it a website? Is it PR? Once you have that list, and it should probably be a tight list, that's going to define your need state. And a few of those should probably be pillars, as in like full-time hires that you have to have, your performance marketer, whatever it may be. But then you could probably hire in an elastic way the others, and whether it's through companies like mine or Kaley's or David's future company one day. But I think that the reason why I like what I'm referring to as the elastic model is it allows you to expand and contract as needed. And in those early days for founders, and I'm speaking as a founder, it's really important to have flexibility and control and not lock yourself into these fixed costs too quickly. So there's a lot of amazing talent out there right now. Strategists, writers, designers, art directors, storytellers. And so if you can get the right group of people together, if we can help, great. If not, I'm sure there's a lot of other connective tissue for you to find your people. I would bring them in on an on-demand basis. Make sure you have your core, and then I'd bring them on an on-demand basis in those early days. David, Kaley?
Yeah, I'll add to it a little bit. So I think, yeah, exactly like Brad said, there's an amazing community of marketers out there that are, freelancers right now. I think the nature of the marketing role has really changed a lot. And a lot of marketers are realizing that we can create these communities of kind of networking and growing with other marketers, and then doing more of like a freelance type of role. So there's a lot of really great freelancers out there. That's an option. I think if you go with marketing agencies, it's really important to understand what type of marketing agency it is and what they specialize in. So you have smaller marketing agencies, you have much larger marketing agencies that are able to deal with much larger scale of processes. That could be an option for you. And that would be just kind of determining your budget and your requirements at the time right now. There's people that do, if you really just need, you're like, hey, I have a team of a couple people that can execute. I need someone who can decide on the strategy for my company. So you can hire people freelance that can actually be like a strategist for you, right? And that might be a more affordable option than hiring someone full-time until you get to the point where you can, hire someone full-time. But yeah, it's just based on your needs and your budget, really.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I think you guys have covered it all. So should we tackle this next one? Prop 1 asks, just one more question. Should we be concerned about marketing and branding after MVP development or before?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this one's a little bit of a toss-up. Obviously, as I've said, several times during this conversation, I look at the world through a very specific lens. It's very native to me to think about brand, message, visual vocabulary, and identity systems, and how you communicate as a founder, as a C-suite executive to the world at the origin. But if that's not native to you and you're more of an engineer or you're more of a product person, I would lean into your strength and make sure that you develop the best product possible and the best possible user experience before you start thinking through things that are not native to you, like my brand playbook. But if you can traverse both and actually focus on the product and focus on the user experience and dial in the basic brand chassis, I would do it. Whether it's before your MVP or after, I would do it early because I think it's how you communicate to your key constituents, and that's going to be a difference maker.
100% agree with that. Kaley?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said before, in like really early stage, it's just understanding that your product may change, and as long as you can really distill with clarity the solution that you offer, and that's something I don't think it needs too much time, because you obviously have other time-consuming things that you're involved in. So just understanding how to communicate what you do and why you do it at the beginning stages.
Yeah, I would say I agree with both what's been said. I would probably lean that you need to figure out your MVP and your product market kind of fit there before you start thinking about marketing, like scaling marketing up. But I think, like Brad said, you can start with the core foundations, which is your story and your narrative, because ultimately that, once you have a product that's working, you need to share that out to your audience. You need a way to find that audience and tell that story very succinctly, and that's essentially what marketing is. So I guess my advice would be not to leave it too late and as an afterthought, proactively work on it from the beginning. All right, I think we're out of time, but I want to throw one last question to the group potentially, and it's just a closing thought of, do you guys have a final piece of advice for PropTech founders that are trying to grow their companies at all? Any final thoughts or advice at all?
Haley,
Brad,
you go.
Kaley.
Okay, my last piece of advice, I guess, would be just like, I know a lot of times the main focus can be on customer acquisition, and it's just like it takes over, everything that you're focusing on. My only piece of advice would be there needs to be a balance between customer acquisition and customer retention and loyalty as well.
Perfect.
I would add a few things. I have a lot of advice to dispense. Number one, keep the main thing the main thing. It's very easy to get distracted. So we're dispensing advice because this is what this podcast is about, but that doesn't mean that you should do some major pivot right now. You know what your main thing is, and stay focused. That's number one. Number two, it is very easy to get deluded into thinking that everyone is successful, famous, and that every entrepreneurial endeavor is a massive 10x success and all the things. It's hard. It's really hard. I've been at this for 4 years. I've had success and I've loved every minute of it, and I plan to keep doing this. But make no mistake about it, this is not a journey for the faint at heart. And it could be lonely. It could be a lot of things. It's unbelievably rewarding when it's good and super painful when it's bad. And if you don't have the right helmet on and you don't understand how to talk to yourself properly and lift yourself back up, and you don't have a good support system, including friends and colleagues and all those things, I would make sure that you have all those things in place and make sure that you've done your gut check as you're pursuing your founder journey. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about this at any point in time, but I think it's the best experience, but I think you need to know what you're getting into.
I love
David?
that. It reminds me of a Jensen Huang quote, the CEO of NVIDIA, who's now like 1.5 trillion, I think, valuation, something crazy. But he said, I still remember that he was like, if I had known how hard it would be to start NVIDIA and how much embarrassment and stress and pain you would go through, I would never do it, and I'd never do it again if I could go back in time. But
Yeah,
entrepreneurs have this special ability of basically saying, not worrying about that and just worrying about and thinking about what's possible. And that is what makes startup founders special. But yeah, my parting tip, I would say, is aligned with Kaley's. I really do think acquisition and growth is essential. When I think about go-to-market, it's brand awareness, demand gen, sales, and then customer success holistically. So think about that end to end. But in terms of really early stage, and if you're thinking about marketing, I just like to simplify marketing into, again, what we talked about today, which is your brand manifesto, your story, your why, you really need to define that. So if there's one action from this call, I would say figure that out and write that down articulately. There's many frameworks, and reach out to us if you need help. So write that story down, and then you need to know who you're marketing to, your ICP, your target market, and you also need to define that. And the marketing's job is just to take your story in front of those people more often. That's basically it. So simplify it in your mind, have those foundations. That's my number one tip, is just have those building blocks at the very least.
I think that's great advice. I got one last piece for anyone who's still hanging on. One last thing for the 1 or 2 people that are still here. I mentioned this to David yesterday. I think it's important for you to acknowledge which train you're on, metaphorically speaking. Are you on the local or are you on the express? And it's okay to be on the local. It's okay to be on the express, but you need to, as long as you know they're heading in the right direction. But I think, again, this goes to like people getting swept up in, oh my God, I need to scale and I need to go faster. And it's okay to be on the local as long as it's heading in the right direction. If you're not in the right direction, we'll get off the train and recalibrate. but I'm so bothered by a narrative out in culture that everything is fast and scale and everyone's a success. And that's why I like Jensen too, because he was kind of like a 25-year overnight success, right? Like that company has been around for a real long time. And I mean, they've been successful for a long time, but many people are only being introduced to them in the last year. And I'm a huge fan of 10-year overnight successes. In his case, it was longer, but these people who have been toiling away in the background for a long time. And then all of a sudden you hear about them. I'm like, they've been chopping wood for a while. That is the way it's supposed to be. Exactly
right. All right, Kaley, any final words of wisdom?
It never happens overnight. That's a myth. Yeah.
Never does.
All
right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Brad and Kaley, for joining me today. It's been so much fun. And we'll see you on proptechbuzz.com. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, David. And great meeting you, Kaley.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.